Anneke Green is with us. She's assistant editorial page editor for the Washington Times. Anneke, I have so many questions for you about what's going on right now with the Republican field. We've already analyzed time and time again the conservative and non-conservative components of each of the four candidates and their potential appeal to the right, to Republicans. But my question for you is this field moving so far to the right that they don't even really align with the Republican base, the Republican primary voters on a lot of issues in a way that in the long term could hurt the party?
I don't think so, David. First of all, thanks for having me on the show, and it's Anneke. I know it's a little tough to tell by the way my name is spelled. I'd have to ask how you're defining moving far to the right. If you're talking about social issues, we've heard a lot more about that this election than we have in some of the previous ones, but most of the country considers itself to be more conservative than liberal, according to the latest Gallup polls. So I don't think anything is changing in the current Republican debates that would be shocking to the general makeup of most Americans.
Well, let me give you a couple examples. I mean, the ways where I see this moving further and further to the right is there was never really a serious discussion about whether there should be ready access to contraception in the past, as significant as there was this cycle that I can recall. We are seeing, when you actually ask people fairly, do you believe the government should provide some basic level of health care, for example, you get 66 to 75%, even according to Gallup, which you cited, saying yes, the government should provide that. However, the Republican candidates don't really seem to reflect that public view. That's one example. Same thing with civil unions and gay marriage, for example. The Republican field doesn't reflect the views of the overall American people, in my view. Do you disagree?
I do disagree. First of all, I would say that contraception isn't considered by most people to be a basic level of health care. There's certainly an assumption in using that particular poll to answer the question about contraception.
No, I meant it as two separate things.
Okay.
So, but in your opinion, you're saying that the Republican field, with the narrative in the Republican field, is representative of the average Republican voter. That's what you're saying.
No, your question is it moving too far to the right to where it would actually harm the Republican Party in the long run? And I'm saying no, it's not. As far as whether it's representative of the average American voter, I wouldn't say that either. I mean, historically in elections, especially in primaries, in a Republican primary, people tend to move farther to the right to lock down the base. That's certainly happening in this election, and it's necessary at this point, especially with the rise of the Tea Party in 2010, which tends to be, leaning farther to the right. I'd say in Democratic primaries, you see people moving farther to the left, and then always in the general election, people tack towards the middle. So this isn't unusual. The issues under discussion might be unusual historically speaking, with contraception playing such a big issue.
Yeah.
But it's funny because a lot of people would argue that it was actually George Stephanopoulos who really even started the conversation in the first place. When he asked that question in the debate about contraception, most people were saying that's really not a mainstream issue. That's not something that is threatening the country right now. Why would you even ask that? And then it kind of bled over, especially with the rise of Senator Santorum as a candidate. So with his being, so publicly Catholic and, contraception not being something that the Catholic Church supports, I think that contributed to that becoming a part of the conversation rather than it being something that's endemic to being Republican in this day and age, or even something that most of the party even cares about. Most polls show that fiscal issues is what people care about, and that's why Romney has consistently maintained a #2 slot in a contest that has seen a lot of people being the front runner at various times.
Yeah, and I don't know, explain to me why that is, because when I hear Mitt Romney talk about he would be a good president because of his business background, I'm so confused by it, because number one, I looked and looked and looked to see what president do we have that had a business background and was a good president, where that would be something we would point to as a good feature for a president, and I couldn't find any at all. I don't understand why Mitt Romney is talking about that. Wouldn't he be the first guy who has a business background and potentially makes a good president? I don't see that in history at all.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of things in history when you look at past presidents. I mean, how many of our presidents actually went to college? But we're not saying, well, you shouldn't tout a college background or being educated as, good qualification for president. I mean, what people tout on the campaign trail for their qualifications kind of is tailored to what what are the nation's needs right now and their assessments of what, what in my background can I explain to people make me a qualified person. So, I mean, this election, a lot of people are seeing this as high stakes. I just got out of a meeting with the president of the NFIB, which is a small business organization, and they're talking about the uncertainty in the economic climate as being a huge inhibition to business growth. I mean, because nobody knows what sorts of regulations are coming down the pipeline, nobody knows how much they're going to owe in taxes at the end of the year, which is debilitating when you're a small business owner and you don't know how much am I going to be required to give to the government at the end of this year.
Does that mean that Mitt Romney's experience making money for himself and a small group of Bain's investors through taking apart companies, does that mean he would be a good president?
I would say that his business experience is highly relevant to the average American voter, and that I mean, again, that's a conversation that's going on right now. His business experience doesn't just make money, and his business, what he did at Bain didn't just make money for himself and a small amount of people. It injected capital into the economy. It makes money for everybody. And, one could argue that even the amount of money that they made that they then paid in taxes, gets turned around and given back to voters through various, government entitlement programs.
I think that that's going to be a hard sell for a lot of people. I wish we had more time, but I'm glad to get this perspective because I try to come up with it and present it to the audience, but I feel like I'm just so dishonest when I give this kind of other side. It's much better when you give it because it's sincere, and I think that that's really good because I don't want to do it a disservice, if that makes sense.
Well, you don't want to ever be dishonest.
Exactly. We've been speaking with Anneke Green, Assistant Editorial Page Editor for The Washington Times. Really great having you on.
Nice to meet you.